Facial recognition technology is used almost everywhere these days, including law enforcement, immigration, education, retail and healthcare. But along with the benefits come significant concerns, largely around privacy and misuse, prompting calls for much stronger regulation. Well, Dr. Dennis Desmond joins us now, lecturer of cyber intelligence and cybercrime investigations at the University of the Sunshine Coast. Dennis, welcome. Should we be concerned about the increasing use of facial recognition technology?
Hi, thank you for having me. There are several security and privacy concerns. Privacy specifically is who's collecting the data, how's that data being stored, whether or not it's being stored in an encrypted format, with whom it's being shared, how it's being used perhaps to approve loans or insurance or maybe other benefits, and whether or not it's actually being misused, as well as even its accuracy. Is it recognizing who you actually are, or is there an error in the recognition process?
It's interesting, isn't it, how it could be used for loans when we're not actually even submitting to the use of it. So how do we marry up the idea that people can be searching us, but we've not given them permission to do so?
So there's several approaches. First of all is legislation has to change. Unfortunately, the Australian privacy principles of Privacy Act don't really apply broadly to facial recognition, collection, use, or even informed consent, which is critical to any kind of personal or sensitive data collection. For this to work, consumers have to be made aware that the information that is being collected is being done so with their permission, and they also should give consent on how that information is used. As we've seen with latest data breaches, there's significant concern about our data even being held by commercial entities. We can do everything right. We can have our passwords correct. We can make sure that we're secure and safe. But when someone else is holding that data that's considered sensitive or could be used for other things, such as to create additional accounts, those companies have to ensure that they're in compliance with the safety and security protocols that have been mandated for the retention, storage, and use of that data.
Is it not the case that we do that when we sign up to Facebook, I'm kind of under the impression that we pretty much sign away our identity as it is. We tick that box that says you can use that and pretty much sell it to anyone you want.
Well, and that is problematic. End user license agreements and terms of service often are extremely vague or very, very long and detailed. And not everybody, when you go to a website, is going to want to sit and read a 20 or 30 page EULA or TOS that says, yes, we can steal your data, take it, sell it, and use it for whatever we want. And that's a problem. And that's where informed consent comes in.
So where we are consenting to things like that on Instagram and Facebook, we're ticking the box saying you can look at my photos. We're not consenting to things like walking into a supermarket and having our face photographed. How do we deal with that kind of situation?
Again, it's an agreement between the consumer and the provider. For instance, facial recognition technology has been in use in casinos and pubs, gambling sites for years. Part of it is to reduce the criminal element, and part of it also is used for internal use for repeat customers and for identity verification purposes. And certainly we understand we want to live and work in a very safe environment. The problem comes into where companies are taking this data and using it at will for whatever purposes, to include marketing and possibly even for being able to ban customers, taking a law enforcement approach in the private sector when this really should be the purview of law enforcement and security services. And I think that, again, informed consent, when we arrive on site, we need to be made aware that, yes, we're collecting your data. This is how the data is stored, where it's stored, this is how it's going to be used, and with whom we're going to share this data in the future. Plus, how long are we going to hold this data? Is it forever, or is it just as long as you're a customer on the premises? And I think that's important.
And even if we consented to all this, and even if we're open to the idea of having our facial recognition stored, how accurate is it? Is there a case for being a mistaken identity or someone posing as you?
The algorithms have certainly gotten better and more accurate. There's still some challenges based on lighting, based on complexion, based on the profile or position of the individual. But again, we would expect that that technology would improve. But until it gets there, there's certainly some challenges that concern us. One of the other sort of the science fiction approach technologies now that we're seeing is being able to reverse engineer an image based on DNA collection. So if law enforcement collect DNA from a crime scene and then they're using AI to generate an image of what that person looks like, they can then use that and match that against a wide range of images in a database. Well, obviously, an artist's rendering is not going to be spot on, and therefore the likelihood of misidentification is significant, and that's a concern.
What can we all be doing in the meantime just to make sure that we're finding out where we should be consenting and checking the I don't consent box if that's what we should be doing?
It depends. I think if you're online with social media, you can certainly not use your image where possible. And I know that's really hard because we live in such, Web 3.0 social environment, peer-to-peer. Don't allow people to, for instance, post images of your children and don't allow the tagging of those images with names. And that is a lot on which these companies rely on to harvest the images for the back-end databases. Use an avatar instead, which is useful. The other is, of course, pay attention to your surroundings. Look to see if there's any notification signs. And don't be afraid to go to the manager of a store and say, I see that you're collecting facial recognition, running facial recognition software and you're collecting images. How are you using these images? What are you doing with the images? Who's actually doing the analysis? And what is the storage capability, the format, and who has access to the data?